registered nurses. She got the start first and got me involved in it about 10 years later.
That's because I would come home from work every day, and he would grill me. What'd you do? What'd you do? I worked in the emergency room at Memorial in Chattanooga. Says, what'd you do? What'd you do? And finally one day I just looked at him and I said, why don't you go back to school and get your own stories? He said, all right, I will.
And so I did. And it's been, Mark Twain said, happy is the man whose work is his play. Well, I tell people I found my playground. And I have loved everything to do with nursing. I don't think there's anything in nursing that I don't enjoy, except when a physician's doing a paracentesis. Every nurse has their own thing. I don't like a paracentesis. It's just...
Anyway.
My blood drains out of my head, or whatever. Anyway. So I am the director of lifestyle makeovers. We sort of got into this thing through the back door. My background, I've taught, I've been the director of education, I've been in nursing administration in a variety of roles, director of education, director of med surg, director of nursing, etc. And I've also supervised the diabetes education for the hospital. And so we both worked with diabetic patients, a total of about 86 years between the two of us. And happen to know quite a bit about diabetes. And so Karen has, I have a degree in undergraduate degrees in chemistry, nursing, and music. And I have a graduate degree in public administration. And unlikely person to be talking about diabetes.
But you're also a health coach.
Yes, I am a health coach. Karen is certified through eCornell in their plant-based nutrition. She is a wonderful, detailed person, and she has this penchant, if you please, for making sure that the language is simple enough that the person without medical education can understand what's being said. So if I say anything you don't understand, I want everyone to understand there's a sign you can give me. I'm underwater. Just do that. That's all you have to do. Just, and I've got it. I'll understand what to do.
He will say, okay, let me restate that. Okay?
How about paracentesis?
There you go.
Paracentesis.
We're off to a good start.
There she goes. A paracentesis is a procedure where a physician comes along and between the ribs he will just insert a needle and he draws off fluid that's around the lungs. And for some reason, pardon me?
Abdomen paracentesis.
Oh, I meant thoracentesis. I'm sorry. The thoracentesis. I used the wrong word. But anyway, the abdomen, that doesn't bother me at all. It's going through that chest wall for whatever reason. And Karen's thing is eyes. Just don't roll your eyes at her. And anyway. Okay. Well, how about if we plunge in just a little bit? Our community situation. We left Fletcher and we went to Grundy County, Tennessee. Now, Grundy County, Tennessee, her father had retired there because his wife wanted to move home, and home for her was McMinnville, and Grundy County is the adjoining county. They found property there that they wanted to purchase, and so they had made that home, but then he got to the place where he couldn't care for himself. He actually fell in the woods while he was showing a piece of property, tripped on a greenbrier and got a V-shaped fracture off the top of his tibial plateau. And he had severe osteoporosis, and it just meant somebody had to be there to help take care of him and his wife. We had tried to see him for quite a while, probably been a year and a half. We'd call up when we had a long 4-day weekend and say, hey, Dad, we have a 4-day weekend coming up. We'd like to come see you. And he'd say, well, it's really not a good time, some other time. We thought, well, that's strange. And then, 6-8 weeks later, we'd get another 4-day weekend. We'd say, hey, let's go see Dad. So we'd call him up and we'd say, we have another 4-day weekend. Can we come see you? Well, I'd really rather you wouldn't. And after a while, I looked at Karen and I said, what is going on with your dad? Why doesn't he want us to come see him? Well, it turns out he had never learned to cook. And here he was. His wife had Alzheimer's. She would start cooking, and she used a recipe book, but she would begin on this page and forget she had done on that page. And so she would go over here and add an ingredient here and then be back. Sometimes she would repeat what she had done. The dogs wouldn't even eat what she made. And so Dad found himself in a position where he had to start learning to cook. So he watched 3ABN and learned how to make a tofu patty on 3ABN. And he learned how to make rice, and he would read the package on a vegetable, and he would learn how to boil a vegetable. But other than that,
he would make a salad, and when we got there and he served us one of his salads, it was minced so tiny that we didn't know if we were eating carrots or tomatoes or onions it was just... And so I came to help take care of Daddy and help teach him how to cook.
He didn't know the simple words that you use, in the kitchen. What does it mean to chop? What does it mean to saute? What does it mean to boil? What does it mean to broil? He didn't know any of these words. And so a recipe was like reading German. Anyhow, so he's living in this community. He fit in real well because he had been from coal miner country in West Virginia. And Grundy County is old coal miner country. But there in Grundy County, they had a lot of health problems. And I came home from work one day, and I dropped one of our local weekly newspapers on the island in the kitchen. And Karen came by a day or two later, picked it up and read it.
And in there was an advertisement from the Grundy County Health Council. And they said, we are looking for volunteers that can help us address the health issues in our county. And I thought, well, I could do that. I had been praying. The very top of my prayer list was, Lord, what is my purpose? By this time, fast forward, my stepmom had passed away. My dad had passed away. And my mother had passed away 10 months later. And so I had this real yearning to be able to do something to help, to make a difference. And so I saw that little advertisement. I called the number, and she said, I'll just come to the next health council meeting, which was in October. And I went. And when I went, I'm looking around the room, and here's all these people in suits. And I thought, I don't know when I've last seen a suit, except for maybe when I left North Carolina. Turns out we were in the poorest county in the state of Tennessee. They had the lowest health rankings of the whole state. They had a 17% illiteracy rate. They had no medical facility. They had a physician that was in the county full-time, one physician, and a part-time. They did have a health department. But to get medical care, you had to leave the county. If you wanted really good medical care, you had to go off the mountain, as we would say. They either had to go to Nashville or go down to Chattanooga. So it was a real dire situation, and they had a very high obesity rate. Now, they live the county is beautiful. There's lots of parks, but nobody got out and used the parks. And so there was a very high inactivity group, quite a high rate of that. There was high smoking, high diabetes. There were some real serious issues. And so in that meeting that day, they wanted to form groups that would help address the 4 top issues in the county. And that was the obesity, the inactivity, mother-baby issues, and smoking. So I volunteered for the inactivity committee. But I knew that if we could get people active, then it would take care of the 5th problem, which was diabetes, and it would also take care of the obesity issue. Right at the end of that meeting, the facilitator said, we have an opportunity to apply for a diabetes grant if anybody's interested. Well, everybody got up and walked out of that meeting except for me. My mother had passed away from complications from uncontrolled diabetes. Oh, it was controlled. She felt real good. Her A1C ran about 7 and her sugars 200 to 300. So she never bottomed out and it wasn't way high. And so my sister, who's also a nurse, felt like, Mother was well controlled and she could live independently. But then Mother started having little strokes and none of us saw it until she had a major stroke. But anyway, so after the meeting, I volunteered and said, I would like to know about the diabetes grant. She said, take it home and read it. Well, I did, and it turns out, had I gone to that health council meeting in November, it would have been too late. So the Lord planted me there. And the Lord moved us from Fletcher. We never could have done in Fletcher what we did over there in Tennessee because these people were so hungry for information and so willing to be guinea pigs that they allowed us to come in and teach them. And they were so excited and they started learning and doing. And move it forward, Steve.
Okay.
I can't see
Anyway, Karen was looking for her purpose, and at the same time, I was going through a struggle spiritually. I was the head elder of the church, and I felt like we needed to lead by example. And so, how do you do that? Well, I would spend a day or two in fasting and prayer, and I somehow felt really drawn to a passage in Isaiah, chapter 58. Is not this the true fast I have chosen, God says? He says, to loose the bands of wickedness, to undo the heavy burdens, to let the oppressed go free, and that ye break every yoke. Is it not to deal thy bread to the hungry, and that thou bring the poor that are cast out into thy house? And when thou seest the naked, that thou cover him, and that thou hide not thyself from thine own flesh? It was talking about my friends, my neighbors, my adopted family. And it says that you break every yoke, that especially, just break every yoke. All the injustice that is done, all of the problems that people are suffering with. Is not disease a heavy yoke around people's necks? And now Karen's applying for this diabetes grant. And I said, we have to do something to help these people. Well, there was the Sanford program, very good program, on how to control your diabetes, how to live with your diabetes and control it. But I said, that's not good enough. We need to break the yoke. We need to break the yoke. We need to teach these people not just how to live with diabetes, but how to reverse diabetes.
And we had just learned this recently. About 2 years before this time,
Chuck
Cleveland had told Steve, he said, I want to mentor you in a diabetes reversal program. And Steve said, what? I didn't know that diabetes could be reversed. And he said, yes, this is some wonderful newer information. And so we helped him do a program in the community, actually in the adjoining county. And it was Lifestyle Centers of America, a video program that they had recorded before they shut down. And one of the reasons they closed is because it took so much money. The patients had to pay a lot to come and go through their program. And then they go home, they get back in their kitchen, and they open the cupboards, and here's all the same food that they're used to. And it's like, oh, I can fix this for breakfast. It's easy. And we said, if we could do this in our community and let them learn to do this in their own kitchens, it could make a difference. So we had been through that program that was now outdated because since they recorded their program, there's been a lot that has changed with trans fats. Remember the big discussions, and all the companies had to get trans fats out of their food? Okay, so we said we want to do something like that in our community. So we started looking.
We needed something that was scientifically up to date. We needed something that was accurate. We needed something that was plain language, simple to understand, something that a common person, people without medical education, could really zero in on and relate to. And as you study medical literature, you actually you get into a different language altogether. And I've seen so many physicians, they come into patient rooms, and I know the language. And I know that the physician was really dumbing it down for the patient, if you please. I mean, he was doing the best job he could to express himself to the patient, tell him what their medical problem was, and he turns and walks out the door, and his shadow has not left the door before the family members, or the patient turns to the family members and says, "I didn't understand a thing he said." I see a lot of heads nodding. You know what I'm talking about. And so I would have to go back in the room, and I would try in even more simple language to try to explain to them what the doctor had just explained to them. So anyway, so this was one of the things we were looking for. I said, there's 7 billion people in the world. Somebody out here has produced a program on diabetes reversal. We can go in and just get the program, plug it in, and we'll do it. So we scheduled our first program to start the first part of January. We got our church to sponsor us, and
we didn't know yet if we were going to get the grant for the county.
We said we can't wait for a grant. These people are suffering. We need to do something for them. And so we spent hours and hours and hours online looking for a program. There was nothing that was affordable anyway. They had the CHIP program, but CHIP program at that time required that you charge the people $399. We were in the poorest county in the state of Tennessee. Multi-wage earner homes. This is where both parents are working, making $24,000 a year in the aggregate. You can't afford that much money per person in that kind of setting. So we had to get something that was cheaper, and we said, what are we going to do? And, I have a scientific background, and I can read the scientific articles and understand them. And finally, I looked at Karen and said, we actually even called Weimar. Karen said, can we use your New Start program? They said, absolutely not. It's a trademark program, and you can't do in your community what we do in our inpatient program. So we couldn't use that. We wanted something that was up and above board. And finally, I said, well, I'll just write one. I'll write one. And so I started mining the bibliographies of existing documents on diabetes reversal, started studying, and we began putting the program together. Fasting and prayer. It's the only way it happened. One lecture at a time. In fact, when we got down to the first lecture, we scheduled the program. It was to begin on. It was supposed to start on Thursday. We went to church board that Tuesday night, and I sat there in church board meeting. And they had voted $3,000 to help us put on this program. And here we are. And I said, guys, I'm in trouble. I still haven't written the first program. I would sit down and start to write this program, and I'd say, well, I can't say that because they don't know this. I can't say this because they don't know that. And back and forth we went. It's such a complex issue. But God guided us through it. 3 hours before the program was done. To be presented. 3 hours before, I turned the program over to Karen so she could get the handouts ready.
I had all that printing to do and then scramble to get to where the seminar was going to be and get set up. And that night we took, I don't remember how many hundred bags of 5-pound bags of sugar to take to show people this is how much sugar people normally eat in 1 year. So we're unloading all that sugar and setting it up. I mean, it was it was a lot of fun. But we had 28 people that came to that very first program.
I've got to tell you, too, though, getting ready, you're supposed to do PR. Karen made some brochures. We were going to do this program. It was going to be once a week for 6 weeks, and then once a month for 6 months as follow-up. And so Karen made these brochures and took them around town. But other than that, we had done no advertising. We had a few people that had called in to pre-register. And I told them, I told the church board, I said, I haven't even had time to do the PR to let people know that we have the program going on. In other words, I was telling them, I'm about ready to waste your money. And anyway, but Karen and I went home. The next morning, she called the radio station, said, I'd like to get a public service announcement on. And they ran the announcement several times that day, and a few people did show up from that. I called the local cable TV station. They have a morning show, they call it. I call it the Mangy Dog Swap Shop. I got a ringer washer on my back porch that needs a new home. Would you like a 1964 broken down Ford truck that's sitting in my front yard with flat tires? Come on over. It's that kind of thing, And I would hear these things going on over and over all day long as I go in and out of patients' rooms. The people were watching this. It was like the gossip line. Do you know Mabel has a little ringer washer on her back porch? It was that kind of thing that would go on. And so anyway, I said, well, I'll call the Mangy Dog Swap Shop and I'll get this on. And so I called him up, and pretty soon I heard the familiar announcer's voice come on, and she said, good morning, can I help you? And I said, yes, I have an announcement I'd like to make. And I told her about the program, and she was very interested. And when we were done, she said, well, would you please hold? And I thought, that's strange. Please hold. I thought I was done with my announcement. But the station manager came on and said, could you come in for an interview? And I said, well, sure. When would you like me? And he said, well, it's getting a little late for today. And I'm going, today? I said, tomorrow? He said, be here at 7:15 in the morning. And so we were there at 7:15. At 7:30, they put us on commercial free for the next 20 minutes. Interview in the morning. That evening, we had a bunch of people show up. The following Sunday, I was in the hospital and went into the patient's room, did my regular assessment, listening to heart sounds, lung sounds. When I was done with that, I hung my stethoscope back around my neck, so I started to walk out the door. And the man said, didn't I just see you on TV? And I said, well, you may have. My wife and I went in last Thursday and did a program with GCTV on interview on about diabetes and a program that we're doing. He said, no. 5 minutes ago, right there. That was my first clue that they were running reruns of that program. They did it 2 to 3 times a day for the next 2 weeks. Guys, when God puts his fingers in something, he's going to make it happen. It's not by might, it's not by power, but it's by my Spirit. God has a plan, and you'll probably hear me say this several times. God has a plan on how he's going to finish up the work. We can invent all kinds of special programs, but until we decide that it's time for us to get on board and cooperate with God's plan, we're not going to see the results. But when we do, he adds his blessing. So, is not this the fast I've chosen? To break that heavy yoke? Is there a yoke that's much heavier than diabetes? Anybody here know? Diabetes is a tough disease to live with. And if there's a way that we can reverse that, then we ought to do so. So, God had other things in mind. He said, well, we're going to push this program forward. And pretty soon the conference comes to our church to do a leadership training for the area churches. Only a few people showed up for that. We were there, and the conference executive asks us, he says, well, what are you doing in your church for health? We said, well, not a lot. We are doing a diabetes reversal program. He said, well, what's that? And so we explained to him what we were doing. 2 weeks later, I get a phone call. Would you come to the conference office and teach a small group of people how to do this program? I said, sure. Well, you'll need to have materials, and you'll need to show them how to put it together. So, can you do that? And I said, well, I think so.
So we set about to figure out what we needed, and one of the things that we thought would be helpful to everybody is to have a video recording of him doing it, because not everybody is comfortable to get up and present a program like diabetes. And so we scrambled to find someone who would help us that would record the program. And I contacted several people, and finally I got referred to a gentleman in Chattanooga that works with Dr. Markham. And we told him what we were doing and asked if he could help us, if he could record the program. And he said, well, what is your budget? And I said, we have $3,000. And there's silence on the other end of the phone. And finally he said, it's $1,000 a minute to record a program like this. And I had silence on my end of the phone. And then he said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm going to talk to my boss first, and I'll get back to you. Well, he called me back in just a little while, and he said, this is what we will do for you. I will record this program on my off time. I will charge you $2,500. Now, mind you, this is 6 hours of programming with about 60 PowerPoint slides in every single one. And so when you record this, you have to pull all those slides in at the right time. It's a lot of work. He said, but I will do this for you, and that will leave you $500 for making your videos, the copies to share with people. We didn't even think of that. So we were so grateful that he left us that money that we could use. And so he said, there's only one thing, though. He said, I'm going to have a break next week, and I have 2 days that are free, and you need to be here on those 2 days, and we will record all these programs. So Steve rearranged his schedule and worked it out, and he went down, and he recorded. Well, by the end of the first day, his vocal cords are swollen, and he could hardly talk. Once he stopped his presentation, then it was like it really hit him. So he came home, and he could hardly talk to me, but we're praying, Lord, Steve has a whole nother day of this, and we need this recorded. Got up and went back in and did the rest of the recording and did great. The Lord allowed him to be able to speak and do this. We picked up the DVDs for the conference, on our way to the conference to do the training. And when we got to the conference, they had reserved their conference room in the back. They had cut off registration at 100. They were shocked. We had physicians and lawyers and nurses and physical therapists and health leaders and pastors. They all came because the Lord impressed their hearts the opportunity that this could make in their communities. What it had done in our community is it had broken down the barriers. It used to be that when you said you were a Seventh-day Adventist, well, they immediately, their lips would be pursed, and as quickly as possible, they would turn and walk away. That whole attitude changed when they saw that we were out there reaching out to them in their community. And we started out, we didn't charge anything for the seminars. We gave them the books. We gave them the handouts. We gave them food samples. We gave them prizes to come and participate. And the stories started coming back to us of the difference that it made in their lives. So it wasn't long until Steve got the Mercy Award for Life Point Hospitals. That's the highest award that they give for the work that he did. He was still working full-time. Then we got the Tennessee Governor's Volunteer Stars Award for Grundy County in 2013. Then in 2015, we got a message that they were having the Grundy County Health Council at one of the local restaurants, and they wanted, well, I'm there all the time, but Steve was working. They said, well, get Steve to come with you. Well, we were slow to realize what was going on. Actually, the Rural Health Association for the state of Tennessee came, big group of them, and presented us an award for the work that we had done in the county. Folks, that was the Lord.
Amen.
The Lord blessed this and opened the doors. So
that comes down to the question, is diabetes reversal possible? Now, I don't want just what one person says. I want to know what science has to say. So let's delve in just for a few moments and see what science has to say. First of all, what I want you to learn from this program is I want you to be able to describe the types of diabetes that are out there and state what is a lifestyle disease. You should be able to know that. And describe how diabetes affects other leading causes of death. And then we're going to look at what science says about disease reversal. So that's what I'm going to cover here in just a little bit. Now, when we put on seminars, we don't give out medical advice. This is health education, and so please regard it as such. And if you have personal health issues, then please see your doctor before you implement anything that we say. Most doctors are very happy to work with people who want to help take charge of their health. But, you're responsible for doing that. First of all, I want to tell you about Phil. Phil came to our program. He was one of these people that is not afraid to take on any kind of task, however difficult it is. And so he was a big man. And his father had diabetes. He had been diagnosed as being borderline diabetic, and his A1C was slightly elevated. And so he came to our program, and one of the things we teach is in order to reverse diabetes, you need to lose weight. So he hit it with gusto. During the 6 weeks of the program, he lost 22 pounds. That's a huge weight loss for 6 weeks. But he kept at it until he had lost a total of 80 pounds, and he held it there for a couple of years. But as often happens, after a couple of years out, he sort of just got lazy about what he was doing and started cheating a little bit and then a little bit more and a little bit more until he was back doing what he did before. Well, if you do what you did, you're going to get what you got. And so he got what he had. He got diabetes again. And he was okay with that. He actually gained up another 20 pounds almost, where he weighed 326 pounds. And he was in size 54 jeans. And anyway, his brother had a stroke. And he stood in front of the mirror after he got the news, and he looked at himself. He said, "Phil, you are a stroke waiting to happen. Do you want to go down that road?" He said, "You know what to do. Get with it." Well, it just so happened that we were coming back to his town at that time to hold another seminar. And he decided, well, I'm going to go back. I need the refresher. I'll just go back and go through the program again. But he said, I've got to change my lifestyle. He says, it's not just going on a diet, it's actually changing the lifestyle. And he said, this time I'm going to change my lifestyle. And so he did. And this is Phil a year later. Phil lost 140 pounds down to 186 pounds, from 326 to 186. And he went from size 54 pants down to size 34. He reversed his diabetes again.
38.
38, excuse me. Anyway, there he is holding one of his big pairs of pants, and you can see he would just about fit into one leg. So he was quite an inspiration. He came to one of our classes just to tell people that this is possible. You can do this. Well, there are different kinds of diseases. Some diseases are lifestyle diseases, and there are other diseases that are not lifestyle diseases, like genetic diseases, things like cystic fibrosis or Down syndrome or cerebral palsy. Those are particular diseases that you really can't get over. And then you have communicable diseases, things like mumps and measles and flu and COVID-19 and things like that. And so those are not particularly lifestyle diseases, although your lifestyle can actually affect those. But lifestyle diseases are, the definition of a lifestyle disease is it is a medical condition or disorder that is associated with the way in which a person lives. So on my list is ischemic heart disease. What do we need to do to prevent ischemic heart disease or to get ischemic heart disease? If you want to get ischemic heart disease, you would eat what?
Lots of cholesterol.
Okay. French fries. Meat, milk, donuts, good. Okay, so you know what to do to get ischemic heart disease. What do you have to do to avoid it? Don't, he says, don't. Don't eat those things. So we would eat other more healthful type foods. Stroke. What do you have to do to get stroke?
Same thing.
Same thing, right? Same thing. Lower respiratory infections. Now, what are we talking about there? An upper respiratory infection would be something like a runny nose. A lower respiratory infection would be something like pneumonia, bronchitis, you're coughing, you got fluid on your lungs, kind of thing. There's gunk growing down there that's not supposed to be growing there. So how does lifestyle cause that? There you go. Smoking, yeah, that's a biggie because it paralyzes the little hairs that line the bronchial tree that sweeps the debris and stuff out. Okay, we have COPD, basically a related thing. There's respiratory cancers. Again, smoking causes a lot of respiratory cancers. Diabetes mellitus, what's that?
Well, we're going to talk about that all week long. You have Alzheimer's and diarrheal diseases and tuberculosis and cirrhosis. These are all things that are lifestyle related, and we can do something about those.
Yes. Okay, so I looked up on the list. In fact, I looked it up this past week just to make sure it was a current list, and it was just about current with what I had before, but they've added COVID-19 as the number 3 thing. These are the diseases that people are dying from in the United States right now. Heart disease, cancer, COVID-19, accidents, strokes, lower respiratory diseases, Alzheimer's, diabetes, influenza, pneumonia, and kidney disease. All lifestyle diseases, every last one of them. COVID-19, albeit, that's communicable as well. So there's some of those that are on both sides of the fence. But the question is, as I was reading through this list, one of the things the experts say is they believe that diabetes is undercounted, it's underrated, because the same underlying problem that causes diabetes impacts a lot of other diseases as well. And so if diabetes is underrated, then what happens when a person dies? A person has diabetes dies. Well, what do they die of? And so I did some research and I discovered that if they have a diagnosis of diabetes, they are twice as likely to die of cardiovascular disease. So cardiovascular disease will show up on their death certificate, but they had the underlying problem of diabetes. And when you look at cancer, they're 60 to 70% more likely to die of cancer. They are COVID-19. The CDC says the data is inconclusive. They cannot tell if it contributes to dying of COVID, if having diabetes contributes to dying of COVID. However, they did say that 40% of the people that die of COVID-19 had diabetes. Does that tell you anything? Yeah. There's something there that's related. So accidents, you're 17 times more likely to have a serious accident and die of an accidental type death if you have diabetes than if you don't. Wow, that's huge. And you're 2 times more likely to die of a stroke. If you lower respiratory diseases, if you have type 1 diabetes, you're 60% more likely to develop a lower respiratory disease. If you have type 2 diabetes, you're 30% more likely. And then there's a very strong link with Alzheimer's disease. Some people are actually saying Alzheimer's is a type of diabetes. It's diabetes type 3. So I think the jury is out on that still, but that's what the literature says. Influenza and pneumonia, you're 3 times more likely to be hospitalized if you have diabetes, and you have an increased rate of death. And then kidney disease is happens to be, your rate is higher, and 20 to 30%, of the people that have diabetes will eventually be on dialysis for kidney disease. So, is there a relationship with all these other things and diabetes? If you reverse your diabetes, you also reverse your risk of dying of all other diseases.
And that's why we want to talk about that today. Can we really reverse? So let's talk the types.
Let's look first at the types of diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is the most prevalent kind. It's the kind that we typically get in adulthood, and it's caused because of increased insulin resistance. We'll talk about that this afternoon. And it's also caused because gradually the beta cells in your pancreas will stop working. And there are reasons for that. Type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease. The rate of type 1 diabetes is on the rise. Can you reverse type 1? I'm not telling people up front you can. Although in some research settings, they have been able to effectuate it, to make it happen. But type 1 diabetes, the instance is on the rise. So something in our lifestyle is making more and more people convert and become type 1 diabetics. Then we have something called prediabetes. Guys, a lot of people think, well, I don't have diabetes. I don't have the diagnosis for it. Do you know that 80% of the U.S. population is already insulin resistant? That means they're already on the way to becoming diabetic. And the average person has already had diabetes working on their body for 13 and a half years before they get the diagnosis of diabetes. And it's been damaging organs and things like that in the whole meantime. So understand that diabetes is really a continuum. It's a disease that starts and we don't diagnose it until some things become obvious. We could talk about ways to diagnose that would tell us years ahead of time, but anyway. Then there's gestational diabetes. This happens when a woman becomes pregnant. She'll become pregnant and then diabetes sets in, and once she delivers the baby, the disease spontaneously goes away. But it's a real problem for several months. And those people usually have about a 70% increased risk of developing diabetes within the next 10 to 15 years. Then there's another form of diabetes, we call it LADA, which stands for latent autoimmune diabetes of adults. This is well known in research circles, but the general medical community has not really latched onto it yet because they haven't coded for it. But it's estimated that probably 10 to 15% of people that are diagnosed as having type 2 diabetes actually have LADA. And LADA is a disease where you are not insulin resistant. And a big difference right there. And then there's something called monogenic diabetes. That's a type of diabetes where you have a specific gene mutation that you can pass on to your offspring, and sometimes even infants will convert and become diabetic. You can tell about it if you do the gene testing. And that only represents about 2% of people with diabetes. And then finally, there's diabetes from chronic pancreatitis or damage to the pancreas, whatever that may be. So these are the different types of diabetes that we see out there. What is diabetes reversal? Diabetes reversal is not something your doctor can do for you because you have to do it through lifestyle. Hemoglobin A1C has to be less than 6.5. We're going to talk more about that later on, but that is an indicator of what your blood sugar has been running. You have to be off diabetes medications for 12 months. That's the definition we've accepted. Some people say 6 months. Some people say 3 months. But you will have normal liver function and normal pancreatic function again. That's what is required. In other words, you have no symptoms of diabetes. If you eat that piece of birthday cake, your blood sugar doesn't spike abnormally. And anyway, so that would put you in what we call diabetes reversal or diabetes remission. And what causes type 2 diabetes? Well, increased insulin resistance. You also have excess fat that first starts in the muscle, and then it goes to the liver and goes to the pancreas. When you hit the liver and the pancreas, the symptoms of diabetes appear, and you've got it. So what can you do to get rid of it? You have to get rid of the fat. Inflammation is another causative factor. We'll talk more about that. Gut dysbiosis. What does that mean? Here's another word for you. Gut dysbiosis is you have bacteria that grow in your large bowel, and when you get bad bacteria that grow there, they'll make you sick. So that's what gut dysbiosis is, when you have bad bacteria growing in your bowel. And then there's decreased insulin-producing cells in the pancreas. If you kill off those beta cells in the pancreas, then you develop symptoms of diabetes. There are things we can do about all of this. That's the good news. What's required for diabetes reversal? You have to be willing to make lifestyle changes. Somebody poked his finger at me and says, buddy, you can't mess with my food. Don't you mess with my food. Well, I'm sorry, I can't help you. You know, if I can't mess with your food, I can't help you. You've got to change what you eat. And you have to reduce the fat in the muscle cells, in the liver, and in the pancreas. You have to have a capacity to be able to get back some of that function. In other words, people that have diabetes for a short duration, they can get over the diabetes, but those that have it for a long time cannot. And then you need a knowledge of what to do. So people with type 1 diabetes, we don't tell them they can reverse. If you've had type 2 diabetes for 10 years or less, you probably can. And if you've had it for greater than 10 years, it depends on you. Depends on how well you've taken care of yourself. It depends on your bio-individuality. Yes, it depends on the amount of exercise, how you have lived. And some people, we have had people that have had diabetes for many years, even 40 years, that have had at least partial reversal. I mean, going to the, from where they've been injecting insulin for 40 years, now they're not injecting anymore. And they take just a partial tablet 3 times a week or something like that. So current understanding of diabetes, we've known for years that diabetes has been reversible. Even though we tell people it's irreversible, it is. We know, when you go out and you do these surgical procedures on these people, bariatric procedures, like lap band or stomach stapling or Roux-en-Y procedures, or these fantastic weight loss surgical procedures that people do, we've known that usually within just a few days, their blood sugars will return to normal. And within a few weeks, pancreatic function returns to normal. Their diabetes goes away. They come off all diabetes medicines. So scientists begin studying that, trying to figure out what is it? Is it the surgical manipulation of tissues in the abdomen, or is it actually the food that they eat? And Dr. Roy Taylor led a group at Newcastle University studying this. And in 2011, he published some amazing stuff that I'm going to show you in just a moment. But diabetes is caused because of excess fats. So this is one of the things that the doctor showed. And if you don't mind, I'm going to step down here where I can point. Right here at the top, this is talking about fasting glucose. So as fasting, you can see a person with diabetes, when they started the study, their fasting glucose was elevated. And they came onto this program. And on this program, he said, we are going to put these people on exactly the same food that we put them on when we give them bariatric surgery. And so they put them on that food, and within 1 week, blood sugars returned to normal and stayed normal for the duration of the study, which was 8 weeks. But they had learned by this time, using very advanced magnetic resonance imaging, MRI studies, they had learned how to measure the amount of fat in the liver and in the muscle and in the pancreas. And so they looked at liver function. Now you can see possibly a dotted red line goes right through here. That's normal. And you can see the fat in the liver is up above normal. And so within a week, it had decreased significantly, but within 4 weeks, it was way down below normal and even lower yet. So over here, what they're looking at is they're looking at insulin sensitivity. Insulin sensitivity was low. These people were very insulin resistant. But within a week, it's above normal. So the liver is functioning normally within 1 week. Not true with the pancreas. You'll notice here is the pancreas, once the fat's stored in the pancreas, it takes about 6 times longer to get it back to normal as it does in the liver. Liver happens real fast. So when this happens, your fasting glucose will return to normal. When you check blood sugars in the morning, they're going to be fine. But you eat a meal and your blood sugar is going to spike because your pancreas is not functioning properly. So as they decreased the fat, it took 8 weeks to get the fat in the pancreas down to normal. But if you look over here at first phase insulin secretion, it gradually came up, but it was not up to normal yet. So these individuals needed to spend just a little while longer in order to completely reverse. But this was huge news in the medical community. Now, in another study, they called this the counterbalance study. They took 2 groups of people. This group of people had had diabetes 4 years or less. And this group of people over here had had diabetes for 8 years or more. And they put them on the same weight reduction program. say, we want to see what can happen here as these people lose weight. And you'll notice that this is tracking the weight. Everybody just about is losing weight at about the same rate, whether they had diabetes for a short duration or long duration. If you cut their calories to 800 calories a day, they're going to lose weight because that's not enough to maintain your body weight on. But now look what happened to the fasting plasma glucose, the blood sugar. The blood sugar within a week dropped back to normal, which is what we saw 2 slides before about the blood sugar. Blood sugars went down to normal for those that had diabetes for 4 years or less, and it stayed at the normal range for the 8 weeks of the study. But those people that had had diabetes for 8 years or more, some of them down to normal. Others of them stayed up high. But everybody gradually, for the most part, they gradually tended to come down. There was one right here. You see that went up and stayed up, and another one here. So that's two out of the bunch that didn't realize any improvement. And we call those people non-responders. Okay, this is looking at the results another way. They're looking at what is achieved fasting glucose after the study. So the people that had diabetes for 4 years or less, they're all clustered down here in a normal range. So all of those people were able to reverse. 8 years or more, a lot of them. Look at all these down here in the normal range. But then there were a few that were scattered out there. So how do you know? Right now we don't have medical tests that can really zero in and tell you predictively, you will be able to reverse, you won't be able to reverse. We can't do that yet. So what if we just jump in and try? The good news is it'll make a big difference. Now, this is an article that just was very, very good. It appeared, I think, in 2019, if I'm not mistaken. But it's called the DIRECT study. And in the DIRECT study, and the small I is on purpose, they involved 306 people in this study, people with diabetes. And they said, we know now that it is possible to reverse diabetes if you have a significant weight loss. And it appears that those that reversed lost an average of 33 pounds. So we want everybody to try to lose 33 pounds. And so they took 2 groups, and one group was their study group. On the study group, they put them on the 800 calorie a day diet for 8 weeks. And then they
went back to eating more normally after the initial 8 weeks.
Yeah, they would give them coaching on how to maintain a healthy diet, and these people would do that. But 24% of them lost 33 pounds, and 46%, that's almost half of these people, no longer had diabetes at the end of the study. But then then in the control group, they said, okay, we want you to lose 33 pounds just like everybody else, but you eat the standard diabetic diet. And none of them lost the target weight of 33%, and only 4% of those, even though they were trying to lose the 33 pounds, only 4% reversed. Now, they took the information and they said, let's look at it differently. This is impressive.
And this is the last slide we're going to show to you because we're running out of time, but we want you to see here what happened if they lost a few pounds or they lost a little more. What happened? Okay, so what happened? If anybody gained weight, nobody in that group reversed. Those that lost up to 11 pounds, there were 7% of those that reversed. If they lost 11 to 22, 34% of them. Look down here. Those that were able to achieve the weight loss goal of 33 pounds in a year, 86% of them no longer had diabetes. That is a new day, guys. Now, we're going to help you as we go through this week. We're going to talk about diabetes. But remember, when we talk about diabetes reversal, we're talking about a lifestyle disease. And when you reverse the diabetes, the same thing that reverses diabetes reverses
cardiovascular disease. My, do we have some stories to tell. But we will have to get back to you this afternoon. So,
Matthew 28.
yes, Matthew 28, verse 20. Christ gave a promise to us, and that was, "Lo, I am with you always." Now, he was talking about spreading the gospel, but I'd like to subject to you that God cares about your health as well. And he is with you always, even to the very end of the age. Hey, absolutely. He says we're a temple of the Lord. God wants to be part of this. Oh, yes, you're absolutely a part of the gospel by sharing the health message. Come back and learn more. Absolutely.
We want to mention that down at the book center, they have the handbooks. We're going to be going through the handbook the whole rest of the week. We will cover all 8 sessions that are in here. It would help you to have one of these. It's not required by any means, but if you can get one, it would help you.
And also there's a book. I had a copy up here. I don't know what I did with it. Oh, here it is.
Here.
There's a book. Those of you that are thinking about the possibility maybe of sharing some of this information in your churches, or if you have diabetes and you are concerned that you would like to learn how to do it, let me encourage you to get a copy of the Full Plate Diet, and it is in the ABC, or whatever they call it here. ACBC. Okay. It is there, but it's a very easy read. There's lots of pictures, and it'll help you learn how to eat the diet that is going to get you free of diabetes. So avail yourselves of one of those. You may want to bring it back to this afternoon's meeting when you come, because we'll refer to that. Okay? Well, why don't we stand together and let's just have a prayer. And then I'll stay by if anyone has specific questions they want to ask. I'll be up here and you can ask them. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for the group that was here today. And Lord, I pray that you will bless each person, that you will fill their spiritual cups full while they're here at camp meeting, and that they will have a walk with you that is lit on fire. Thank you for the opportunity to share this time together. And may we leave now with your blessing in Jesus' name. Amen.